I came into this week with a mindset of like going to war. Like I want to go and crush people this weekend. I don't just want to go and survive.
Do we want the last like 10 minutes of podcast here to just be you guys go off on every org that you have? Yeah. Stop nodding, Pat. Hello and welcome to Euphoria episode 15 ahead of week 4 of the LEC Summer Split. Playoffs are right around the corner, and as always, we're available on YouTube, iTunes, Apple Podcasts, and SoundCloud.
And today we're joined by Mac and Pad to talk about a lot of their theories when it comes to coaching, and also then what the hell is going on in Vitality and why they think this is going to be a success in the long run.
Spoiler alert, I am very entranced and I get very easily sold. So if you're not sold, you can call us out on it. But we also talk about some of the teams who might not be making it. Things are looking grim. 8 teams are going to remain at the end of this week. Let's get into the episode. Welcome, gentlemen. Good to have you on this beautiful morning, especially in a week that is, I imagine, pretty tense. But before we talk about League of Legends, how's life outside of League of Legends for both of you? You're both grown-ass men. You're both adults, and as much as is possible, okay, you're both cosplaying adults as we all do, and as much as is possible in esports, you know, like we all get like our one day, half a day off a week, more or less. So what are you guys up to? I think a lot of people know you as behind the scenes. You're these wholesome coaches, wholesome support staff that you've been for so many years. But what do you guys get up to on the off days, on the other time, during the other time?
For me, it's literally just like work into fatherhood, into life admin, and that's like the revolving door trio that I currently exist in.
Is there anything is there like tiny like nuggets of free time that you like get to like play a game a tiny bit or watch an anime? Because I can imagine like I'm with just work and life admin, I'm already overwhelmed. So adding a child to the mix sounds like probably like 30 minutes is precious to you now.
Dude, 30 minutes is a long time. You
get it all done in 10 minutes, okay?
No, I mean, it's really funny because you think, like, I would have thought that I would have missed all the things that I'm not doing more. But actually, at least for me, when my daughter arrived, your whole perspective on life just changes. And like the things that before were like really onerous or just like really normal everyday moments just take on this really magical quality, you know, like walking the dogs or doing the dishes or whatever, like doing it together as a family with your child, just it's so different and it's so rewarding. So I think it's very much like a new life stage. And like I would have thought that I would miss playing games and things like that, but I actually don't at all. But the answer to do I play games anymore is no. There's no way I have time. Wow. There's no way.
Yeah. I mean,
yeah.
That is the most like, I did not expect to ever hear any combination of that conversation on this podcast. You're the first father we've had, the first parent we've had on this podcast.
The first responsible adult
we've had. Yeah, and like you make this, like that was great. That was beautiful. That was so nice. But I'm just like, I have no idea how to follow that. It's like, where do we go back to anime memes? Like, how do we say that's like the most...
Like, I don't even have a pet I can take care of.
I guess I should have just gone, ha, loser, you don't play games. Like, you're finding joy in the little things? I just beat the Elden Ring DLC, so I don't know, buddy. My life pretty again.
I just had a solo queue game that wasn't toxic. So
no,
that wasn't
no, man, I'm super happy for you, and it's really cool to hear that like it has not only obviously changed your life in a big way, but also made you appreciate a lot of those little things. I'm sad that you don't get game time. I'm not sad that you're not sad, but like, you know what I mean? Like as a gamer, I think that who hasn't had any sort of fatherhood related epiphany, it's hard for me to imagine letting that go, but I'm glad it's been a smooth process. And probably in your new position, right? You don't have to be as immediately close to, do you still feel like you have to be super close to League of Legends in the same way that you did when you were, because now you're in a more of a management position, right?
No, I think the position is basically the same as what I was doing before. It's
Okay.
just a different title. But the title is just to reflect the fact that Vitality has traditionally or historically had like a very different approach to the way that their relationships have been with their coaches versus like what I have been used to. And so the title is kind of to reflect the change in that, right? Like, for example, I have a lot more insight into things like budgets and future financial targets for the organization than like a coach might in another organization or Vitality's previous coaches might have, for example, right? And so like the management title is just to reflect that. But I'm still doing the exact same thing as I was at Mad Lions
So you don't play games, but you still watch a lot of League of Legends.
Yes.
Yes. That's what I want to hear, because that's what keeps the world going around. So how's it been for you on the opposite side? You've got this guy disappearing to be a dad. Cringe. Again.
Ew.
I found my angle. I'm just going to pretend like it's weird. It's too wholesome. I can't handle it. We're just going to pretend like it's this other thing. But how's life for you? How's everything going on your side?
I do all of the things that he doesn't miss. It's beautiful.
Yeah. Play games?
I don't play many games, honestly, because I think when you spend like 10, 12 hours a day coaching League of Legends, the last thing I want to do is play League of Legends.
Sure.
So like in the past, I've enjoyed playing Valorant. Like right now, I have one evening a night where I play World of Warcraft Cataclysm with the Danish boys that I don't see. I just don't get to see them maybe once or twice a year. So we get to do that. We just speed run all of the raids in like one evening at a night.
I like that.
And then I've just introduced my wife to Dragon Ball because she never watched it. So we are currently watching Dragon Ball. We're doing the anime thing.
You're starting at the very, very beginning. Goku's a tiny...
I didn't know that there was Dragon Ball before Dragon Ball Z.
Insane, right?
I've watched all from Dragon Ball Z and onwards. All of it. Multiple times.
The two things that threw me are like, one, like, wow, power levels are like a lot less ridiculous.
Yes.
And the other thing is just like, there's a lot more explicit in certain circumstances. They really cut out a lot of the adult content in the later stages of Dragon Ball.
It's wild. Like it's the 80s though. Like this was made, I think 84 or 85. Like it's so explicit. It's so explicit.
It's definitely wild. That's super cool though. The thing I want to ask you about though is because Rob doesn't keep up with the Euros.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Or Dragon Ball, to be honest.
Or Dragon Ball, but we can skip Dragon Ball for today.
Dragon Ball hasn't had much movement recently.
Yeah, we take one of our most controversial, our most beloved and hated segments that we do is we'll do anime check-ins, right?
Beautiful.
But I want to get the football check-in because I feel like the part that probably doesn't like the anime check-in might like the football check-in. I have not kept up with the Euros, right? Yeah. I need you to like give us the TLDR of if League of Legends terminology can enter, you get bonus points, but I'll take the short version of just like if I'm coming into it today, what should we be excited about? What is happening? What is going on in the Euros?
Okay. I mean, I think I've already done a couple of like League of Legends presentation for our team on Chinese teams, while also making analogies to football.
Nice.
I'm a massive Liverpool fan, and Mohamed Salah enters most of my presentation. And when Mohamed Salah isn't there, Jurgen Klopp is there.
Yes. So now let's remember that again. Let me also specify. I have no idea who that is, bro. I don't watch any football. So is that like Faker? Like who is that?
Jurgen Klopp is like what's his name? T1 coach.
Coma.
Yeah.
There we go.
Jurgen Klopp is Coma, and
Yes.
Mohamed Salah is Faker.
Okay, got it.
Like Salah is the GOAT. He is the GOAT. But to sum up Europe League, like actually, I think for the most part, you've seen a lot of like bottom team LEC teams play, like where they're kind of just doing nothing and then taking a Drake and then doing nothing and then taking another Drake and then hoping, praying to Allah that they will get sold.
Yeah.
And that's been the majority of the European League, even on the good teams, like you have England, it's coming home once again. It's not coming home. It's just not coming home. They have the greatest offense that they have had. They have the greatest mid laner in AD. They have the highest mechanical players in the role. They have Djakilov. They have a Showmaker. It's not enough because the defense suck. Their top lane is griefing. He's 0-10 every game, so they just can't progress. They played 1-1 versus Denmark. Denmark sucks. So bad.
I have never been more compelled to like. I'll watch the tail end of Euros and World Cup every year because it's just hype. I love how excited people get about it. But this is the most compelling explanation ever made. If you make a podcast that's just this, it's like 10 minutes every week to just update people on football and League of Legends terms and vice versa. I'll subscribe in a heartbeat, brother. Like that's great content.
I'll set it up for you.
Excellent. Sadly, this is a ruthless transition. Speaking of teams that are struggling to do things,
couldn't have predicted this one.
Who would have thought? Obviously, again, I want to say thank you guys for coming on. I know it's a tough week to come on. I know that you guys have a lot of work to get done ahead of the final week 4 here of LEC. But I do want to talk a little bit about what has been going on behind the scenes with Team Vitality. And while I do want to look back at the year overall and the greater picture of the project, I think it would be weird not to start with what has just happened, which has been yet another week of disappointment, right? Week 1 was tough. This week now coming in. How do you look back specifically on week 3? What do you think went wrong? What's kind of going on from your perspective? And either of you can start.
I think week 3, like results-wise, was a real shame because our practice was really good. And not from like a we were winning scrims perspective, right? But from a we were learning and taking real decisive steps towards developing a consistent shared philosophy and understanding of how we want to play the game. And that we were really like coming together in that respect, right? What happened at the weekend, number one, I think I did one of the worst drafts of my entire career. This is like up there with getting knocked out of play-ins in 2020 against Supermassive by drafting Graves and Renekton into Armut's Malphite. Like it's up there. It's up there, guys. So that was like, this draft was honestly just like abysmal. Like we had no front line, we had no CC, we had no engage, we had 380 carries versus Malphite. Like,
so you just have a history with Malphite.
Don't
Trigger
sleep
warning,
on
okay?
Malphite.
Like,
Just don't sleep on Malphite.
Don't sleep on Malphite. So that was pretty horrendous. And even in that game, actually, I felt like the players did a really good job of like staying optimistic, finding like opportunities. But like there were so many fights where you saw like Leona and Sejuani like whiff their ults, blow them on one target, that guy survives, and we're like, they have no ults, we can win a fight. And like nothing happens, you know? And every team just walks away from us because we can't stop them walking away from us. It was so sad. Before the game, we were about to go on stage and Kazi was like, guys, it's a level up game. Like, if we're going to win this game, we need to level up. So we're going to have to do stuff that like we haven't done before, but that's great. Like that's a good challenge for us, you know? And like it was genuinely that difficult of a draft. So that was game one, which I felt pretty wretched about for like a good 24 hours.
Same.
And then game two, I think across the board, we were not firing on all cylinders, to be honest with you. So I think that one, it's complex. It's complex for sure. What's your take on the K-Corp game?
I think in the K-Corp game, like the comms felt a lot less like composed. We were a bit stressed in the game for various reasons, right? Like the recent history with K-Corp. Also, like, you know, like Lyncas joining us after not extending with K-Corp playing for us. He was like, it was definitely a different Lyncas that we were seeing and hearing in that game. Yeah. And I think that's completely natural. And I think in the absence of him like being 100%, I think actually no one was playing at 100%, and I think that really showed. And I think so far this split, that was probably like our worst game that we played. Like even after 3 games that we played in week 1 where we like should have won. I think that like a lot of the steps like Mac talked about of like sharing a shared philosophy for how we want to play League of Legends kind of slipped in that game, and we ended up like reverting back to some really bad old habits that we hadn't seen like literally since like practice before week 1. So that's like that was the K-Corp game. I think it was by far our worst game. But I think like even in scrims yesterday, we showed up and normally we'll come in, Mac and I will have a plan for how we want to approach practice, but actually the players showed up ready to bring us together and look at the same thing, right? Because I've said this a million times, right? And Hilly will int and he will be silly Hilly, but if you're not looking where he's looking, it's going to turn out bad for you. And that game, we were not looking.
I'm sorry, I hadn't heard silly Hilly before. Right, and they overuse narrative phrases, baby. Thank you for that one.
In the box.
In the Hilly box. New ways to talk about. I like silly Hilly better than some of the other options. It feels simultaneously more disrespectful and also more respectful. It's, in a high-stakes game, very disrespectful. Regular season
but
game,
not offensive.
Yeah, not rude, but kind of not rude. You know, I just feel like I'm nagging Hilly. It doesn't. It's very odd.
Silly Hilly.
But like we can see when it works when you lads come together. Like I was just looking at it's the Heretics game that stood in my mind, right? It was super clean. So like, is it just the communication when you get onto the stage that people start to become more quiet, or like what do you feel is the thing that kind of breaks down in that moment?
I think a lot of it does come down to communication. A lot of it does come down to like players planning ahead in a way that helps to put other people on the same page with them, right? That helps to put other players in a position where it's easy for them to follow you or easy for them to look, or when players are really, really listening to each other, we can tell super easily behind the stage, right? And what happened in the K-Corp game is that we had one guy going, I'm going to do this, and one guy going, this is happening, one guy going, this person has no flash, and one guy going, let's do this. And it's like, no one's listening, right? When we're really, really good, you have one guy saying, this guy has no flash, and another guy says, okay, I have TP, and another guy says, okay, if they contest bot, I'm going to do this, and another guy says, if you do that, like, and it builds, right? And they build on top of each other. And when they're building on top of each other like that, it makes it so easy for everyone to make really good decisions and for everyone to be looking in the same place. And when our players are all looking in the same place, usually that same place is where Hilly is about to engage. When everyone is looking at Hilly and what Hilly's doing, things go really, really well. And that's actually pretty much the same story as last year on Mad Lions, in my opinion. Yeah. Right? Like that was our big problem with that roster, was getting everyone to just go and do the same thing. And it's a very, very, like, the reasons behind are very, very different in terms of the two team environments that we have, like this year versus last year. But I think so much of it does come down to communication, and also comes down to like a general shared approach, right? Like Pad mentioned that he'd done some like football based presentations, right? And like if you know anything about Jurgen Klopp and his football style, which you don't, basically his Jurgen Klopp's football approach, if you compared it to a League of Legends team, would be like FPX 2019.
Got it.
Go and do stuff. Don't let the enemy breathe. Yeah. And that's very much the approach that I think a team should have if they want to get the best out of Hylissang.
Yeah.
And that's very much the approach that we're trying to like move towards. But that's difficult, and it requires people to break down a lot of their old ingrained habits, like Pad was saying about, oh, nice, we have 3 dragons. Let's do nothing for the next 5 minutes because we have Dragon Soul in 5 minutes, right?
Yeah. I hate it. I hate it.
Yeah, I can see, but my question is like, it seems like you have this really clear, and an oversimplification, most certainly, but it's like we go where, a player makes a call and everyone goes, and most simply, that's usually Hylissang. You make it sound so, like, when you describe it like that, so simple from the outset, and it's something that you've done with different teams in the past, and the context, of course, of the environments, as you mentioned, is different, but like, why is it so difficult to get it to manifest, like, in this split particularly? Obviously, you add a new player, but my assumption would be that, like, are you guys, every time you bring in someone new, like rebuilding to make sure that everyone is comfortable? Because it feels like it always takes a little bit of time for your team to really lock in. And even when you guys lock in, like, we're consistently estimating you because we've seen your best. We're like, this is a top 14, this is a top 14. But then like every other week, people are looking at us like, why do you keep saying this? And so I'm just trying to understand, right? Like, you describe it so eloquently as to what needs to happen, but then we don't see it consistently manifest on stage. Is it just that because it's so different, it takes so much time? Is it that because, like, are you just working against all instincts of your players? Why is this such a difficult process for the team?
It's instincts, like ingrained instincts, like you said. It's also that League is a really complex and nuanced game. It's really, really difficult to see some of these engages. And I think Hilly is a player that's taught both me and Pad so much about League of Legends, because the degree of micro detail that Hilly sees in terms of, I've seen X, Y, and Z, and therefore I know I can make an engage and it's winning, are so small. They're really hard to see. Like, it's a simple but not easy problem, right? In the sense that, what one person might look at a situation and be like, there's no way this engage works. Whereas Hilly might see, oh, this guy doesn't have bone plating. This guy just used his W and doesn't have W for 9 more seconds. And I have flash and this other guy doesn't have flash. So if I go here and there's such a like complex chain of events there that are really, really micro details that make it difficult for other people to see that.
Yeah.
Sorry, actually, a complete side tangent. Did you guys ever play, and I cannot remember your exact coaching history, did you guys ever have to scrim against Unicorns of Love?
Yeah.
Yeah. Because this is the thing that I find really fascinating about the Hylissang history, is that, like, Unicorns of Love, Rob, you weren't around for this era, were notoriously the worst team in our league to scrim. Not because they were bad partners, but because they took an hour between every game to review. And having been in those reviews, that is a team that will spend 30 minutes or would spend 30 minutes on a single team fight talking about macro. And so it's really funny to be like, you guys are like, oh, we value this so much, is because I remember the cost. And the cost was every single team in the league hated scrimming Unicorns of Love because they were so micro-focused. But obviously when they were at their best, they were like the best team fighting team in our league for a long time. So complete side tangent, but it's cool to see that, like, that is actually coming through, and that is a skill that he has. Obviously, you can see it in some of the crazy engages he pulls off, right? But that is something that's also been brought to you that has helped level up other people past just Hylissang.
Definitely. I think, like, learning, like, I think there's a few things we've already touched on. I think, like, for example, Vito's instincts are like polar opposite to Hilly's. Like, in every case where Hilly wanted to go forward, Vincent wanted to go backwards. So that's been a process where Vincent is coming closer and closer and closer now. And I think that one lesson we really learned from having EUphoria and Hilly on the same team was that we needed to start hiring for personalities that could fit together with Hilly.
Yeah.
Because what you talk about with the 1 hour long reviews, we don't do those. but we need people, and especially players, who are willing to talk League of Legends with Hilly, because he has so much to share, and it's beautiful. But
and he needs to share.
And he needs to share. If he doesn't get it out, if he doesn't get it out of his system, he doesn't function. So that means that like right now we have both Lyncas and Photon and VTO that are willing to talk to Hilly before scrims, after officials, before officials, and that helps Hilly like spread his knowledge more and more. Right, like when we received him in Mad Lions 2023. Like the majority of the work we did with him was help develop his communication skills so he could start transferring that knowledge to me and him, so we could transfer it to the players. And now we're kind of extending on that by helping him develop his communication skills so he can transfer directly from himself to the players. And I think that is a long process, and that's why there's still some inconsistencies. But like we've extended Hilly, I believe. Yeah. So like we believe in this guy, and while we might not show up at our fullest this year, like we are like the process is good. Yeah, and we're gonna be scary when we land on the same page.
What's that process been like now, bringing in Lyncas, right? Because was Lyncas already kind of bought into this, or was it like a process again of okay, cool, we're going to start to talk you through how this is going to function and kind of get you on the same page as Hilly?
I think I've worked with Lyncas like as his positional coach for 2 years leading up to him joining us. Outside of his period in K-Corp, where Mephisto and I made an agreement that Mephisto would take over his positional coaching, because otherwise like I couldn't coach him in LFL because Vitality Academy was there. So he was already like well known with our like sort of coaching style and how we wanted to play League. But I think every new player who gets to play with Hilly, there's a transition period.
Yeah, there is.
And Lyncas has this thing that has now become a beautiful meme of the team of they shouldn't do that. And that would just make him miss like infinite amount of opportunities, because they shouldn't troll here, they shouldn't do this, they shouldn't do that, and he just wouldn't be there. To the point where like when you play with Hilly, there's nothing that's called they shouldn't. And he's getting there. And when those two are on the same page, Jesus, like they're so insane.
When we talk about your team, I think that you're one of the few coaching staffs that have always tried to look more long-term at the bigger picture, right? And I know something that Carter on previous teams, and he's with you guys as well, has also talked about is more bigger picture. But that obviously requires a lot from fans and from an organization. Yeah. Is that like something that's validated by Vitality as an org? Because right now we're talking about, it's going to come, when it does come together, it's going to be sick. But like, you guys are at the bottom of the standings. And it's a really nice conversation. I like what you're saying. I like the theory behind it. But like, you guys are in pretty dire straits right now. Like, how do you balance the need for immediate success versus like belief in a more long-term project?
Toughie. I mean, first of all, you need to develop a really, really strong relationship with the org itself, like the upper management, investors if necessary, board of directors, whatever, in the case of Vitality, which I think we have. So you need to get like a lot of buy-in, and you actually need also to do what's called managing upwards, right? Like setting the expectations and like making it really clear what we value as a team and what we value as an org and what we believe will work for us in the long term, right? So that everyone's on the same page with regard to expectations about what the process looks like and how easy or hard it will be, et cetera, et cetera. And I think for us, like with regards to this specific split, I don't. We were in a position with the roster that we ran in winter and spring where we could have carried on and been a top 4 team, maybe a top 6 team. Who knows, right? Like it could have got better, it could have got worse, but we didn't really see it moving in that direction. And actually, for me, that's not even necessarily relevant. Like realistically, as a European League of Legends org, there are kind of 2 things that you can aim for. You can aim to be an org that is happy with making Worlds every year and then going to Worlds and getting smacked, which is what happens to most teams that make Worlds, including my teams previously. Yeah. Like I've had that experience before. It's not that fun, actually. Or you can aim higher, right? You can aim to like actually compete internationally. And for me, obviously it's nice to get Worlds. I didn't see us being better than the other teams that had a good chance of being top 3 with the roster that we had. I didn't see it happening. So I would rather do something that is risky, but that I know will be better in the long term and might be better in the short term. I would much rather take that approach. And I know that this option will be better in the long term in terms of the roster. And yes, there is a difficult adaptation period, right? There's, Lyncas is an amazing, amazing player, and this guy will be so, so, so good once he's acclimatized. But there is this period of acclimatization where we are asking him to retrain his habits, take on a different mindset, learn how to play together with Hilly, learn how to play together with Kazi, learn how to get the best out of his like mid-jungle pairings with Vincent. Like there are so many different aspects. And we also have to get to know him as well, right? Like as coaches, the benefit of having had a player since winter versus having a new one in summer is that until this weekend, we didn't know what Lyncas looked like when he was stressed.
Nope.
And so we can't anticipate how to put him in an easier position for a game that is likely to be stressful. Because we can anticipate that the K-Corp game is going to be like high stress for him because it's a team that he just left and there's a lot of emotion there. But we had no idea how he would respond because we haven't seen him in that scenario, right? And so that means there's going to be a certain degree of volatility for sure. But in the long term, we really believe in this guy. And if our aim is to be not just like a good team that makes worlds, our aim is to be a great team in the long term. And in order to be a great team, I think this was the right change. And once you kind of filter your decision-making process through that philosophy or that end goal, then this becomes an easy option. And sure, there might be some short-term consequences on the way, but that's okay.
And how do you manage those kind of the expectations that you set with the players versus, hey, we're going to have this long-term goal that we're all going to work towards versus kind of the short-term, well, this sucks moments, right?
For sure. I mean, that's tough. And I think as a coach who is also looking at the 3-year period, like you don't get to look at 3 years as a player, So that's just not realistic. So I have to kind of wear two hats there, right? And for me, it's about, okay, I think this is better for the long term, 100%, and gives us a really good shot at being a great team in the long term in terms of building around the people that we want to invest in. And in the short term, I think it will be, I actually thought it would be like the same or better, but there's always a chance that it gets worse. There's a chance that we'd be in this exact same position if we hadn't made a roster change, to be honest with you. I can't tell you if that would have been the case or not. But I think it's actually potentially could have been the case for sure. Because I think our roster was like fundamentally imbalanced, and that's one of the reasons we made the change.
What is it that Lyncas, and obviously I don't want to make this about being rude or disrespectful to Douglas, it sounds like Lyncas is bringing something different. So what is it about Lyncas? Obviously you have a lot of experience positional coaching him. What is it that he brings, whether personality or in-game, that is something that you really wanted for this roster heading into summer or believed in long term?
I think he brings a second voice to the shot calling. I think Hilly had a big burden in the first two splits, shot calling early, mid, and late game, like pretty much single-handedly. And when you are spending so much time looking for small details to find engagers, while also having to talk about map openings and where we want to move the map and how we want to play in the future and around neutrals, there's going to be moments that you're going to miss. And there were moments that Hilly missed or didn't communicate in a way that allowed the team to look where he was looking. So bringing in Lyncas, like in all of his previous teams, he's been the primary shot caller, the only shot caller, and that has been a big part of like his adjustment, right? Is in this team, he's not the primary shot caller. He just needs to make sure that he has solid plans for the early game and that he backs up Hilly in mid-late game. And that's been part of him, adjusting to our team, is coming in and having a much less talkative role than he's had on previous teams, and that's something he struggled with a lot as well. But I think having those two together gets the best out of both of them. Holy moly. Jesus. And they can take turn, right? So Hilly can focus on engages when he's supposed to focus on that, and Lyncas can focus on his micro mechanics when he's supposed to focus on that. And I think that was sort of like the big one. Outside of that, like one of the big sells for us is that Lyncas has like shown that he can play multiple styles of jungle, which like we see so often at Worlds, right? We see at Worlds that the meta changes from summer playoffs to Worlds, and some teams gets annihilated by it. Like I think the Worlds were with Shadow, where we were playing like level 3 ganking Hex Flash, like
it was like set Lee Sin.
Yeah, it was set Sejuani. We went to Worlds and it was Nidalee or whatever, and we were just we actually can't play any of this.
Exactly, and Mad Lions wasn't the only team. Like there was a lot of teams that Worlds just couldn't do that.
I mean, G2 was in the same boat, if I remember correctly. Yeah,
exactly.
It was a set. It was a Sejuani for Jankos, and then it was like full carry jungle meta, and we were like,
Yikes.
Guys, our jungle pool. We do this every year in EU. We're like, oh, that year we're like, oh, our jungle pool is terrible. The next year we're like, oh, guys, I'm sorry, our top lane pool is terrible. Like we just like once per year, there's one role where we like really feel like we get exposed, and that world was for sure jungle was rough. Jungle.
So I think that's a big part of it, that he can play all of the AP junglers. He can play the AD bruisers. He can play the tanks. And outside of the game, this guy is like, he's just working so hard. Like he's so hard. There's like, he loves adversity. Like this guy embraces adversity. Normally we get our players to read books or snippets of books, or we do like highlights on YouTube videos on topics that we think are interesting. This guy recommended one of my favorite books to Mac and I, called Can't Hurt Me, by David Goggins. And David Goggins is a psycho. He's a complete psycho. So you should read this book, and you should take what he says with a grain of salt, okay? Like, it is good, but he's a complete psycho.
Maybe a tablespoon of salt.
This guy is nutty. But Lyncas lives by this guy. And he works so hard. And anytime, like, he has this saying where, like, in your professional life, there will be things that you don't like doing.
Yeah.
And those things you have to do better than the rest. And that's Lyncas. There's no moaning, no complaining. If there's anything that he doesn't get or he doesn't want to do, he'll do it harder than all of the things that he likes to do. And I think that these kind of personalities in esports are so rare. Like they don't really exist. I haven't met people outside of him that functions like this. And I think having a person who can lead as an example outside of the game long term will help foster a culture and environment that Mac and I see as a winning culture. But that takes time as well. But that's one of the big reasons.
Yeah. He's also wonderfully relationship focused. You know, a lot of the time you have people who are incredibly task oriented and very driven. And a lot of these people, if you think of like the typical kind of like CEO personality, you just run people over in your wake. For someone who is as driven as Lyncas is, and as like no bullshit as Lyncas is, you would normally expect a degree of that, right? But he's actually very well balanced in that he really puts in a lot of effort to make sure that his relationships with his teammates are good. He really cares. The first time that Lyncas showed up in Berlin, he came with like this lovely box of chocolates for me and my wife, you know? And like he's just such a sweet person actually as well, right? And I think he's really well balanced in that regard to be like a very important piece for Vitality in the future in terms of building that winning culture.
Guys, I love the long term. I love the long term. And like, you sell me on this. We're coming to 2025. You give me this speech about your roster. I'm like, guys, I believe in this team like nobody's business. But in 2024, still, I have to keep bringing this back because I think for a lot of people, for the people who are excited about the long term project, they're going to be like, this sounds amazing. But there's going to be a certain amount of people and a certain amount of fans who are like, yeah, great, but like win a game, guys. Please win. Because like this week coming up, right? Unfortunately for you, this is one of your hardest possible weeks.
Nah, easy.
Yeah, you're playing G2 and SK for people who don't know. And like, there are a lot of teams around you in the standings who have comparably much, much easier schedules. It's you and Team Heretics really who are going to be under the knife a bit.
Mad Lions too, I believe.
Mad Lions, they play BDS and they play Rogue. Yeah. So it's a bit of a split bag. You guys are the two that have both of your team's opponents being qualified for playoffs. Rogue and GX play each other, so by default they have a bit of an easier schedule. Now, I fully expect this weekend to end in an absolute mess of tiebreakers. I have no doubt. But like when you look ahead towards this weekend, stepping away from the future, building the perfect relationships, building up to be this long-term project where you can, you know, conquer all of EU's demons, it sounds like, at Worlds. What is the focus this week? Like, what are you working on this week to make sure, is it as simple as just adjusting the drafts? Is there anything like really immediately tangible that you can share with us that is the focus for this week to make sure that in these two games or in these two games in the tiebreaker that you guys are like on board, that you're 100% focused, that you're 100% locked in? Because you mentioned pressure before. I imagine for Lyncas, pressure of playing against KC is a lot, but the pressure of playing against elimination is always really high. Like, what have you learned? What are you bringing into this week to make sure you bring home some wins?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot. I think, to be honest with you, I mean, you mentioned the schedule. Like, I don't care who we play against. I really don't care. I think as a competitor, it's so much more pragmatic to just believe that if you play your best, you're going to win. And I think if we play well this weekend, we're going to win both games. I think that's just the reality, is that if we play at our best, I don't think that there's any reason why. Like, there's no inherent reason that makes these other players or other teams better than us for any reason, right? Just because there's a name tag on them and they've had success in the past. I don't care.
Classic SK.
And that's something that we try to instill in our players as well, right? Classic SK. But yeah, I mean, sure, SK's in a good spot in the standings, but like realistically, I don't think that there is anyone in EU right now that's performing at like an incredible level. And I think that we can be really good when we play at our best. I think if we play at our best, we're going to win. I think it's that simple. And I think you have to take that mindset as a competitor. Yes, there's pressure for sure. There's absolutely pressure. And in the short term, do we have issues? Yeah, we have loads of issues, right? When we're working on those, right? We're working on like understanding, like making sure that our early game planning is better. We're making sure that we're responding better to opponents and adapting better to info. We're making sure that we're putting each other on the same page. We're definitely working on the draft to make sure we're on the same page on the draft. Like there are so many things that we are currently working on behind the scenes. Our team fighting and our late game execution is a big one because that's an area that we've fallen down on pretty consistently during like the last 3 weeks. We have fumbled team fights a lot. Yeah. We have fumbled so many crucial team fights, and that's something that we need to put loads and loads and loads of reps in and put loads and loads and loads of focus on. So yeah, of course, like there are always short-term goals that we are working on, and we're, I wouldn't say that we're in firefighting mode right now, but I think we came into this mindset. I came into this week with a mindset of like going to war. Like I want to go and crush people this weekend. I don't just want to go and survive. That's not the way that I want our players to go into this weekend. I want them to go into this weekend believing that if they play their best, they're going to win. It's as simple as that. And all that it takes for them to play their best is for them to focus on what's under their control right now. And you asked before about, how you sell the like long-term versus short-term dichotomy to the players, right? Yeah. And that's the answer, right? If you focus on the things that are under your control right now, and that is the energy that you put into practice, the energy that you put into your relationships with your teammates, how you approach adversity, how you approach all these situations, like where you put your attention, your energy, then you will get to play your best. And if you play your best, you're going to win. It's as simple as that.
Yeah. Again, your speeches are inspiring. Rob, I have to go to Rob. I think this has to be a me and Rob discussion because you guys, I love the united front. I love that you're like, no matter what I ask, you're sticking to your guns and you're sticking to your principles and your answers. And I think that's awesome, especially because I think there's a burden to, if you want to follow a philosophy as a leader, you have to, everything you do, you have to follow it. It does put me at a disadvantage here because for me, I would love to hear specifically what you're going to do against G2 and SK, who you're like, we're not going to survive. We're going to war. I'm like, yeah, well, right now maybe you should just survive. Rob, like, what are your concerns as we head into this week for Vitality? What are the flags for you? Because I think we've heard so much from you guys, and I do really appreciate the level of insight. But I think for us, the spectators out there, it's hard to know where this leaves us.
I think it is trying to get all of Vitality on the same page seems to be the biggest issue. Like I was watching the KC game, you kind of have 3 people are going for the Rift Herald fight, 2 others are going the opposite direction. You're kind of like, okay, no one really knows what they want to do. Or Hilly going for an invade to get vision or something mid-game, he gets caught and suddenly the whole thing falls apart. So I don't know, like I don't have an answer. I'm not a coach. I'm not going to be able to tell you that it's like, hey, shut up and follow Hilly, lads, or whatever it is, right? It's like,
there is a certain degree of that.
Yeah. But it's like, I think that seems to be the biggest thing is just like having everyone agree that this is the one thing we're going to do for the next 2-3 minutes. Because that's why I brought up the Heretics game. The Heretics game was beautiful to watch. The vision was there. You've got Hilly who's like playing off of like, I can play up towards this bush to bait out a bunch of spells. We're going to win the team fight off that. Or
that's that micro window that we were talking about, exactly, right? Where like Hilly there, when he's walking, it's into like enemy raptor camp. We're blue side and he's walking into red side raptors, right? And like, when I look at that situation on the map, it just looks like a totally normal situation to me. Hilly sees one person for like 1 second, and he's like, "They're inting. We're going to kill them all right now." Like, and he starts like screaming in the comms, "They're inting. They're inting. They're inting." Like, there are 3 people jumping on him and killing him, and he's like, "They're inting. They're inting. They're all dead." Like, and he sees it so fast. And that game is such a wonderful example of what it looks like when things go well, right? So, I mean, specific plan. This weekend, we're going to beat them in the early game, and we're going to flash on their faces, and we're going to kill them, and we're going to win the game. We have an amazing early game. We have such wonderfully skilled players,
Yeah, I think we probably have some of the strongest stats in early game in the league. I think we have consistent like solo kills, duo kills, early ganks working out. Like we've been so good at accelerating like early games, right? Like even week 1, like we had a bunch of games where we had 4, 5, 6, 7k gold lead and then choke it out, right? But I think like what we need to do for this week is run it back for week 2, because in week 2, both of the games, we talked a lot about the Heretics games, but also the Mad Lions game, we were good. Like we were good in those games and we were on the same page. And I think that given enough agency on the correct players and enough engage, we're going to go and fist some people this weekend.
Yeah. and it's a simple but not easy problem, right? And as a coach, like, you know, there's an element of shut up and follow Hilly, right? Yeah. But as a coach, it's your job to frame that idea to all the different members of the team in a way that makes sense to them, and in a way that appeals to them, and in a way that motivates them and that really speaks to them, right? So as a coach, a lot of the time, you kind of just like, you see a problem and you're like, you find inspiration somewhere. It can be a book, it can be another concept, it can be something else. I'm a big believer in finding inspiration from all different fields of life. Anime, whatever it is. And you just throw it at the wall and you see if it sticks, you know? And you keep attacking the same problem in like a variety of ways, of like different phrasings, different framings, different terminology, different ways of explaining similar concepts. And you keep throwing them until it sticks with all 5 players, you know? And that's kind of the job, right? And that's like the short-term plan, is to just keep finding solutions non-stop every single day to try to sell these ideas to the players, to make sure that they are seeing the same thing.
Yeah. Guys, you're so charming.
It's
so hard to just like not be bought in immediately. I'll be honest. I really like the idea. I hope for your sake that it manifests and you're able to show. And if worse comes to worse, I hope that you're able to just survive for your sake and for the boys' sake. Because again, I still would put, and Rob, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, I would put this team still high on the tier list.
Yeah.
Which feels, and again, I'd get roasted for it.
You've been sold.
I have been sold. I have been sold. And look, like, do I think that there's a 50-50 chance that it just blows up in your face this week? Yes, 100%. But when I look at the ceiling of this team, and when we've seen it, and the Team Heretics game is a good example, and I think even games in previous splits where it's like, it's clear to me, Karzi's still one of the best, if not the best, AD carry in our league, right? Hylissang, when he's on form and the team is following his great photo, it's like, you have the pieces. It is incredibly frustrating to watch sometimes because the pieces are sometimes. Yeah. I mean, like, look, but like, I'm fundamentally, I am bought in. I think that there's still a certain amount of just like what happens on the day. It's a super volatile week. Obviously, we've only locked 4 playoff spots. KC is the only team with 3 wins. Everyone else is 2 or 1 in the case of MDK. Before we talk about the rest of the league, I want to get in some Twitter questions, some YouTube questions, some community questions. So let's start with Rob. Where do you want to start? Oh yeah, there. Let's start with Useless Tanuki.
I like that.
Yeah, at the Ghost
No
Plays
such thing.
1. Is there a magic behind every ADC having their peak while playing with Hilly as support?
Yes.
I don't know if that's. I haven't checked every Hilly support. I mean, Samus was like top 3 AD league.
You should check, and you should check how ADCs have done after not being with Hilly.
I mean, there's one very clear example. We wrote a lot of emo songs about it. So look, although now he's doing good. Shout out to Reckless and Poby over in LCKCL. But yeah, like, is there anything that Hylissang does? I mean, he obviously demands a very specific play style. What is it about him? Has he helped Karzi become a better player? Because even when Karzi was with Kaiser, like, they were still a top duo lane in the league. But this most recent year, I feel like, is one of the best years we've seen from Karzi individually, probably ever. Like, what is, and you guys have been with him for every step of his evolution. So talk to me about dynamic. Talk to me about what Hylissang does to bring this out of AD carries, if that's even a fair concept.
I think he demands a lot in the 2v2 understanding, making sure that you review microtransactions in the bot lane and make sure that you understand the matchups, like to a point where you can play it on edge. Because if you cannot play on an edge, then, well, hello. And then I think that a lot of it is actually also on Karzi. Like, Karzi has grown up so much since I met him in 2021, and Mac had him the year before as well, right? I think that Karzi's personal development has helped him become a much more consistent player as well, right? Like, if you think back to 2021, one of the things where we would constantly be clutching our hearts behind the stage was when Karzi was approaching a mid-wave. That was scary. Every mid-wave was scary. And I don't think Karzi has died like this. Okay, he actually died on fast.
But that's against Malphite. It doesn't count. It's Malphite, guys. It's Malphite.
You are not the only coach to have that experience. We have a lot of ADs, especially over the last 3 years, that have just walked up and died, like walked past the creep line and just died on mid-wave.
But for the most part, I think that's been a big part. Like, it's been 2 of them making sure, like, I think, like, something we often talk about is that whenever there's a new patch, like, if our bot lane goes and play 2v2 on the new patch and they grind the matchups, they are the best bot lane. Like they just don't lose any matchups, and we can take soft losing matchups and have them win it just because they are willing to put in the time and understand all of the microtransactions in these matchups and have the information on all of their 2v2 timings when they need their jungle there. And I think that's something that Hyli demands, because you like, I think in the past we played kind of like maybe 2v2 bot on a gut feeling, because like we just did. But I don't think there's that element to it anymore, and that brings a lot more consistency. And it also allows Kasi to consistently then have more gold in the early game, and Kasi with items is a scary ADC.
Do you think then this Hyli requires a certain personality or a certain AD carry, or is he very good at just bringing out that part of you? Is it like hey, he's super supportive and suddenly you feel like a badass and you just want to keep putting in the time of effort?
He requires trust. Hyli needs trust, and he needs to have an emotional connection with the person that he's playing with, and that's been the case for all of the AD carries that he's played with, and he's still really close friends with all of the AD carries he's played with, and I'm sure the same will be the case for Kazi, because he is such a kind person. He's such a kind and gentle and soft person, and he has his foibles, you know. He's like, we said that we put a lot of work into helping Hyli communicate, and that's been a big struggle for him, is, you know, communicating effectively in a way that
screaming when their inting isn't helpful.
Why are you doing this?
Yeah, you know,
why?
Conversations of the form, "Why are you not here?" For example, right? But that, outside of kind of those conversations, you know, even prior to us, he has amazing relationships with all the AD carries that he's worked with, because he is just such a gem. He's just such a good person. It's really hard, even with all of those things and these frustrating moments where Hyli doesn't say anything, goes in, dies, and then asks you why aren't you there afterwards, and you're like, but
I will kill you.
Even in spite of those, like, he has a heart of gold. You know, there was an interaction I'll tell you about recently where Chachi came and worked with us for a little bit on on a short-term contract from Big as a coach. And there was a moment where Chachi and Hyli sit down at the table together, and they both look at each other and they see each other's wedding rings, and they're like, "Oh," and they compare. And I was just there at the table like, oh, you know, as like an old EULCS fan, right? It was such an amazing moment. And when you see Hyli interact with people like that he's played with before, people like Chachi, people like Upset, people like Reckless, like the bonds that he has with them are so genuine and so whole and so supportive and fulfilling. It's really hard to push back against that in a way. And Akazi especially is an individual who just performs so well when he is emotionally fulfilled and when he's stable and consistent. And that's how you get him to be the most stable and consistent, as well as him putting in a lot of work, which he has.
Yeah. God, you guys are so good at selling me on people. I'm so enraged. I'm so charmed. Yeah, I'm still gonna have to call him out when I think he's doing the dumb thing. Silly Hyli, as we've now learned.
He makes mistakes also. You know? That's the nature of playing on the knife's edge, is that sometimes you think that guy used his W and he didn't. Sometimes you think it's an 11-second cooldown and it's actually a 9.8-second cooldown, and you just die because the Corki has W up and he dashes away from you, and then you're dead. Right? That happens.
Yeah. But it's good to have that clarity, that it's not so much about the micro. And I think we've known that about Hyli for a long time, but I think it's good to remind people too, right? I think that it's not that he's above reproach or not that he's above mistakes, but that usually there's a greater vision behind them. Speaking of, at Jamada Lol, Jamada, friend of the show, the podcast.
My former assistant coach.
For Pad, who is the greatest space maker of all time, excluding Hylissang? Also, can we kill... creating space is so funny because in 2014, a friend of mine was working with the Dota team, and he was like, creating space... Like, if you need a new meme for League of Legends, just say creating space. Whenever you're inting, you're creating... 2014. Dota 2. Here I am, 10 years later, and you come back, and I'm hearing creating space again. I'm like...
You are welcome.
It haunts me.
Biggest space creator. Wow. Mickey X is up there.
Yeah, for sure.
This guy is he's watched Hyli play.
They took some notes out of the same book, I think.
I think Lyncas and Barrel those two are definitely up there. I think Lyncas is one of Hilly's biggest inspirations. Like Hilly loves Lyncas, and Lyncas is now considered a mainstream good player, but was ridiculed for many years for his playstyle. So I think like Lyncas is like when I try to go and fish for good examples for Hilly to like improve his game or like see different opportunities or highlight like how other teams are playing good League of Legends similar to us, Lyncas is often one of the people I look at.
On Mako.
On is On from BLG is crazy space maker.
Also, someone who was like, this guy's inting for a large portion of the start of his career.
Yeah, it really is. And you can see now that like this BLG roster, the core of them have been together for so long that the amount of times now where you call out on his engages or like troll or too much or whatever are very little. They're very few. Because the teams are either there stomping enemy opposition, or they're in a position to trade on the cross map whenever he is creating space.
Good terminology. Like the wink, too, for people in podcast land. There was a wink. There's some pointing. It's a good time. So, well, thanks, Jamada. I want to transition over to the other part of our question. We asked people to like talk about who was and wasn't going to make it. There are some people that don't think that you're going to be there, but I'll go to one right now. Very adjusting ADC. Casey's going to end the week with 4 wins, Rogue with 3, GX, Team Heretics, Vitality, and MDK are going to get 2, so there's going to be a 4-way tiebreaker, and GX and MDK don't make it. That still has you making it. Now, that's a lot of information, but when you guys look at the standings, when you look at the upcoming schedule, I know you're very focused on going to war on your schedule, but given that you might have to play tiebreakers against some of these teams, like when you look at the standings right now, who do you think are the weakest links? Who do you think are the teams that like it would be surprising to you, and yeah, thank you, Rob, for sharing the standings, to make it through. I'll read them out for the people at home. Again, our top 4 is locked, so I'm going to start from 5th down. KC 3 and 4, GX 2-5, Rogue 2-5, Team Heretics 2-5. You guys are at 2-5, Team Vitality, and then Mad Lions Koi 1 and 6. And then as far as strength of schedule, again, you and Team Heretics with the most difficult strength of schedule. Rogue and GX play each other, so obviously a huge boon. And then GX plays KC, Rogue plays MDK after that, and then KC plays SK and GX. So there's a lot of potential for upset here. MDK, I think the easy bet on who isn't going to make it at one win.
And KC in a good position.
KC, in a pretty good spot. I mean, three wins. You also play GX. Your fate is in your own hands. How do you guys feel about some of these other teams that are fighting amongst you? How do you feel about like all of the teams around you? Do you think it's a similar state for you guys where they're waiting for things to click? Are there some teams that are just like full collapse? Obviously, I don't want you to flame anybody, but like, what's your read on the teams around you in the standings right now?
I think there are 2 teams here that have been on a pretty solid downward spiral, which I think are Heretics and Mad, who just seem to have really struggled for whatever reason. I don't know. It looks like, from the outside, it looks a bit like a Team Boom kind of scenario for both, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
I think Heretics made a lot of changes coaching staff-wise, and they kind of like blew everything up. Made some pretty questionable decisions there, if you ask me. So I think there's probably some context there.
I think I can guess what you find questionable, but we'll just continue on. I don't want to start, I don't want to start a whole other discussion.
Shout out Peter Dunn.
Yeah, pull one out for Peter.
Well, now you said it. Anyway, we'll continue on. I'm not going to start a whole nother. I'm not trying to go to war with Team Heretics right now, man. I've given them enough flack for earlier in the year decisions, so.
Yeah. So I think those 2 have for sure spiraled downwards. I think Rogue has been on a consistent plateau for the whole year, to be honest. Like, I don't think that much has changed for them. I think they're basically where they were before. I think Giants has picked things up, and K-Corp has obviously picked things up as well. I think Jackie's has really come into his own as a player. I think Jackie's has been looking wonderful on Giants, and Antonio has been a like pretty positive upside surprise for sure.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's the biggest surprise of the season is how good the Antonio has been.
Yeah.
Because I thought it was just a vibe adjustment, right? Like things were going bad. Something needed to change. Jungler
Sub in
made
the Spaniard.
sense.
Let's go.
Yeah.
I was also like, maybe it was a branding decision. You know, he's obviously has a huge, but I'm very impressed.
Rumble's been
yeah,
sick.
and it's not
Tanks are
like
sick,
he's the greatest top laner in the league, but he's a clear upgrade, which I did not expect to be saying at this point in the season. But yeah,
Spanish people Spanish orcs bringing in Spanish people.
Crazy.
Crazy.
Do we want the last like 10 minutes of podcast here to just be you guys go off on every org that you have? Yeah. Stop nodding, Pat. I'm in a partnered league with these teams. It'll be my head on the chopping block and maybe adjusting on the side. Also, your
I'm a
head.
freelancer. Go ahead.
Okay, so I actually think that some of these teams has been playing somewhat inspiring League of Legends. Yeah. I think Giants, even in their losses, have played League of Legends, and it's been good to see. Like they lost the game versus G2 in a very Vitality style, like of the we are so ahead, and now we hate Baron or we hate using Baron, and that's like that can happen. I prefer teams losing like this than teams just not doing a lot. And while we were beaten by K-Corp, I think that K-Corp in their losses have looked like one of the worst teams in the league because they just don't do anything.
Sure.
And I think that versus us, they did a lot because we were really not so good.
I mean, they were very proactive, I will say. Like it does feel like an upward trend for KC. I agree that I think still the most significant part of the season is when they were kind of gift wrapped that game from Mad Lions Koi, and they'll be very happy to have it. I hope that they continue to grow so it doesn't just feel like they snuck their way in, right? But the fact that they're now at 3 wins is excellent because if they had just been at 2, or if they had lost that game, who knows? This obviously is a team under a ton of pressure who has failed consistently, but is now looking all right. But GX is the big surprise to me, I think.
Yeah,
because
I agree.
They not only is their schedule pretty favorable, again, compared to the other teams fighting for the spot, because they play Rogue day 1, which again makes it feel like their destiny's in their own hands. They play KC day 2. And despite KC's slight uptick, I think favor GX there. And I really thought at the start of the season that bottom 2 was like Rogue 100%, right? Short of something that's showing us something new, which sadly they still really haven't, outside of 1 or 2 instances. And I thought, it was GX or KC, and now I feel like both of them make it in, Rob. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm really pleasantly surprised by GiantX. Like I think Juhan was great in the early stages at holding stuff together. Jackie's, as he said, has already been great. So I have a lot of faith in GiantX, and I'm like looking forward to seeing what their trajectory is over the next like year or so, not just over this split. So yeah, I expect GiantX to be able to make it in. KC, Rogue, and kind of MDK are kind of where I'm like, I don't really know what way to take them. I think KC, as you say, got the lucky win, and I think with you guys, it was like punishing your guys' mistakes well versus kind of being a bit more proactive. So I'm kind of a bit unsure with KC, but yeah, and then Heretic, it feels like Heretics just don't really bring anything anymore. It's Rogue and Heretics where I look at and kind of poke with a stick, and I'm just like, come on, do something.
That's a great meme.
Yeah, it's just, I feel like there's never really anything from them. So
yeah,
if you're looking from a perspective of, hey, if you can actually do things, it feels like it's probably KC. But I always just look at like Heretics going like, hey, maybe you guys could just turn it on at some stage. But I think at this stage, if you're going to see it, it was going to happen. So maybe it's just like MDK and then either Rogue or Heretics just from lack of proactivity.
Yeah.
I mean, watching
Heretics like lane swapped in their last 2 games, right? Fun story from Scrims. They lane swapped against us 6 games in a row. Like the day before, I think the weekend, and Photon he was just there like
lost his mind.
He's like, please let me play League of Legends. Just one time, sir.
To play League of Legends.
Wonders like you were just perma chilling, just like, I've been here, I've done this.
There was just piss chilling in chat, like, yeah, you're having fun, Photon.
He's got WoW on the other screen.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. But I think Heretics has A, a really rough schedule, and B, also just looks like the one of the least proactive and least put together teams in the league for sure.
It's interesting because on paper, like, you just look at the records, it's really easy to say, oh my God, this is so crazy. And it does still feel crazy to me because there is so much that can change in a single week, right? Glad this isn't a 3-day weekend and is a 2-day weekend, so that at least there is that one more scrim day for teams and there's one less opponent to focus on, although tiebreakers means, more or less probably will play one more opponent at high stakes, that's tiebreakers. That's how it goes. But it's just I think playoffs is really where things start to get more interesting because right now, because there are those 2 teams in absolute free fall, which is like, I think, or even 3, right? Like Mad and Team Heretics feel like they're in just completely lost, and Rogue, as you mentioned, is kind of just this low plateau. It's like any 3 of these teams, I think, are likely candidates to be 9th and 10th. And although Rogue do really hold their destiny in their own hands because they have the easiest schedule of any of these teams in terms of record. They play MDK, they play GX. Like, playoffs is where it's interesting because making top 8 what has been surprisingly contentious this entire year.
Wait, a single round robin best of ones produces volatile results.
What?
We give the people what we want, man. Like what do you want? You want to fight a war? You want prep? No, we're gonna do the thing in Gladiator where suddenly there's a lion behind you, and that's our
this is great. I want more best of threes in the year. If this is the price to pay for best of threes, I think it's great. I think it's great for the fans. I think it's wonderful.
Yeah, it's we won't get into the whole format discussion. Obviously, there's more nuance there than I think I can provide without bringing in our comp ops people who would be like, but wait. Context.
There's more.
There's more. There's context. But best of threes, I think it's rare this is really going to start to shape up. And that's where, obviously, we have a lot of faith in you guys if you can show best form. But I'm curious, who do you think, based on current trajectory, can actually make a deeper run? Because it's really easy. Cutting 2 teams out of a 10-team league is not, like, obviously it's really tough for those teams. I don't want to underestimate that part. But that's a cut and dry. After that is where it gets unclear to me because the top 4 is so very clearly the top 4. And so while right now it's easy to be like, all right, all you have to do is live through this weekend, or in your case, you guys want to go to war. For me, it's hard to evaluate or see where these teams actually end up because they're facing one of those top 4 teams. And I don't think, short of you guys being on full form, that any one of the teams that will make it here is going to be favorites against their top 4 competitors. Is there any team you think that could, like, it is on a trajectory that could really surprise us? Again, I know we've talked about you guys, but any other team that you think could really surprise us? Or do you feel like it's a little bit doom and gloom for the teams that do ultimately make it to playoffs? Like they're going to make top 8, but after that, not a lot to expect.
I think Mad still has the chance to like pull stuff together, win games this weekend, scrape in on a tiebreaker, and then gain some momentum and go upward from there and start the positive snowball. I mean, that's what we did last year in spring on Mad, and that worked out pretty okay. So I think there's no reason why they can't, and I think they have plenty of potential in that roster. I just think they haven't gelled super well this split, and things have been a bit fraught. Then I actually think that looking at these teams, I think Giant X has the most potential to do like the XL summer last year run.
Yeah.
And I think a big part of that is actually just that they have really clear roles within the team. And I think if you look at Jackie's as a player, I mentioned him earlier. I think it's funny because last year you had this run that XL made where it was like Rumble for Odo Amne, Maokai for Peach, Tristana for Abadage. It's good. You know?
Yeah. Same comp.
And I think they can do like a similar thing with this roster. And I think they actually have a bit more versatility there. I think Antonio has for sure a lot of weird picks that do stuff that people won't expect, right? Like he'll play Zach or some other random stuff like this, right?
Shogath,
yeah, he'll play something, that can make some impact. And I think that I remember last year when we played XL in best of 3 in season finals, or best of 5 in season finals, was it? I think, yeah, best of 5. Like I remember we banned Tristana, and they were like,
What did you do?
we don't have our comp anymore. But I don't think that's the case for this Giants X roster, actually. I think that Jackie's is actually a lot more versatile, and I think he's shown that already, right? Like, you've got the Tristana, the Corki, the Varus. I think, did he play Ezreal the other day as well or something like that in official? Kaiser? Yeah. And I think this guy's actually pretty versatile on a lot of these meta picks and off meta picks as well, and he's willing to bust them out. So I think there's a decent chance that Giants can surprise with some draft wins, and if they can stop other people from shutting down their winning recipe, which I think they might be able to from mid and top, then I think they can make a decent run.
So the ultimate question here, or actually, is there anyone else you want to shout out? To me, it feels like Giant X, I think, is the big surprise here. Mad Lions quite caught me off guard, but I can see why there'd be some optimism. Again, in winter, they were so damn good. It's just, oftentimes is this the case, as we saw with Rogue so many years ago, and we've seen some week from you guys too. There's like what appears to be a downward spiral, and then something happens in that week of scrims, or someone yells at someone and all the tension is gone, and suddenly they're the best team in the league. Like, this happens very frequently, I feel like, for us in LEC. But short of those moments, is there any team that has particularly surprised you outside of GX?
I guess like the biggest wild card for me is SK, while they're 6-1, because we just haven't scrimmed them for ages, and we haven't played them in officials as well. So I actually don't know just how good they are. And SK have had, like, in the last 2 splits as well, a really good start to the split, and then, like, not looked the hottest coming into the best offs. So I can see them, like, unless they have made significant improvements in best of series, that they could struggle. I think Fnatic and G2 have already had a really hard schedule so far. Like they went to MSI, they had to travel to China. Fnatic went really late, and I think both of them are now going to Saudi Arabia in the break week as well.
Yep.
So I wonder if because like historically at least there were some some issues in Fnatic like with Noah and some anxiety and stuff like that. So I wonder how these teams are kind of holding up with the busy schedule and lots of traveling. So I actually think that while the standings are pretty clear cut, I actually think there's a lot of room for surprises in the best ofs.
I like that. I like that angle. Especially good consideration. I actually just completely blanked from my mind that for Fnatic and G2, they're going to be continuing to play. And they're both teams that are... We had Nightshare on last week. He's like, they're very galvanized, I think is the best word for it. They're very motivated by their loss. But G2 obviously motivated, but
angry.
Motivated, but like, also, we called it the hangover, and it feels like they're back into shape. But we'll see how that shapes up when they again are now going to play international competition. Maybe it makes them stronger. Maybe it's exhausting and means they can't actually focus on or take the time away that they need to be recharged. That said, the last question of the episode, gentlemen. One final rundown. Straight, sweet, simple predictions. Pad, who is not making it this week? Who is finishing 9th and 10th?
Heretics and Mad Lions, or Heretics and Rogue?
Well, that's an or. But okay, we'll give you the or.
I'm really struggling to choose between MDK and Rogue.
That's why I chose two.
Nice.
you can just say, at this point, you say one, you say the other.
Yeah,
We
come on,
figured
bro.
it out.
Like 50-50 with me.
Okay. I'll say Heretics, Rogue.
Okay. I think Heretics... I actually think the MDK is more likely than Rogue still, somehow in my head. I think they're more likely. I think Heretics, Rogue don't make it.
I'll say Heretics, Matt.
Nice. Heretics, Matt, Heretics, Rogue. Rob?
I think MDK Rogue. Yeah.
MDK Rogue? No, I think it's Heretics are for sure on the chopping block. I'm on my...
Well, you're like the number one Heretics hater this whole time. What happened?
I can't remember their schedule.
They play G2 and Fnatic. They play G2 and Fnatic.
MDK Heretics.
I will also say MDK Heretics. I want to believe in the MDK dream. I like how passionate their players are. Despite how critical people are of Supa, I like that he said he'd come out and beat Deft. I want players like that in our league to thrive. But the performance has not been there. And the schedule is also not the easiest. It's a pretty mixed bag. So at the end of the day, we are all aligned on Team Heretics.
Yeah.
Sorry to the Team Heretics boys, but it's looking pretty grim. And we'll just have to see how it shapes up week 4, the final week of the regular season. After that, there is a dark week, and we will not be making an EUphoria episode, but then we'll be back before playoffs, which may or may not include Vitality. Based on our predictions, it should, but who knows? Find out this weekend on the LEC. GX vs Rogue, one of the big first matches. It's our game 2 on day 1, and then G2 versus Vitality, the two that I'm most excited for. Be sure to tune in. We'll see you there.